And the shakeups are happening in the White House. Congress is pushing ahead on health care and tax reform, but Senator Ted Cruz voicing some major concerns. Take a listen.
I believe tax reform happens, but I think tax reform and ObamaCare are intertwined. If we get ObamaCare done, and I think we've got to, then I think the chances of tax reform skyrocket. If ObamaCare crashes and burns, I think the chances of tax reform drop significantly.
Here now is Congressman Kevin Cramer from North Dakota. Do you agree with that assessment, sir?
Well, what I agree with there is that without ObamaCare, if we don't repeal ObamaCare, tax reform will be different. I don't think that it's dead, but it's different because, as we know, in Obamacare, the Obamacare taxes are nearly $1 trillion. If we're able to repeal that $1 trillion, that makes for a very different baseline than if we don't.
I mean, does it make sense to go ahead with tax reform as soon as possible? Would it be an easier feat than health care?
Well, first of all, let's be clear. We've been going ahead with tax reform. The Ways and Means Committee has had 4 hearings this year. The blueprint, unlike our American Health Care Act, the blueprint had the luxury of being out there all of these 6 months. Plus, we all ran on the principles in our Better Way agenda that included the principles that are in the Republican blueprint. So, no, I think that the order of things is proper, and the Ways and Means Committee has continued its work. It's been sort of the gift of, frankly, of the American Health Care Act, is the Ways and Means have been able to do their work under the radar. Everybody's shot their holes at the, at the bat tax and the deduction of interest and all of those things. So, we're having a good discussion apart from the drama.
Okay, so I'm so glad to hear you say that, because that's what we've been hearing from folks, and it's great to have someone on saying, confirming that that's what's going on, that you guys are actually working, you're getting it together, and that in some ways you're able to do it more effectively because everybody's distracted by this other thing. Can you tell us a few of the highlights?
Well, first of all, the blueprint has been public for, like you said, at least 6 months now. So we know that we want to lower rates, obviously. We want a simpler code, flatter code. We want it to be pro-growth. I think one of the things we get a little bit hung up on, Melissa, that concerns me is, in terms of swamp speak, is that we tend to not trust our philosophy as much as we trust the CBO or some sort of a pay-for. And if we believe that a simpler, lower rates, say 3 brackets instead of 7, flatter, if we believe that that's pro-growth, that will create wealth, that will turn into jobs, that will turn into more revenue for a government, where we should need less government because of economic growth, I think we should take that out for a test drive rather than require some, dollar-for-dollar pay-for because, some static scorer says so.
Okay, so you're here, I mean, the group in the studio right here is saying amen, because we understand the difference between static and dynamic analysis, and the way that the CBO scores it doesn't take into account any of that growth that I happen to have studied economics and believe exists when you do make those cuts. Do you think that you can drive that home, though? Because the flip side of that are, your fellow congressmen who say, oh, we've got to pay for it, and that sounds so wonderful, but what they're really saying is that they don't understand how the math works.
Well, and I'm not an economist, but I know how a dynamic economy works at the most local level. I've seen it in North Dakota. In the earlier segment, you talked about the rollback of regulations and how that's helped the market. It's certainly helped create jobs in North Dakota. We've seen a nearly 50% growth in drilling in North Dakota just since Donald Trump signed the Dakota Access Pipeline order a few months ago. So the ultimate regulation is the tax code. Yeah. And that's why, regardless of what happens with Obamacare, we may have to change our target a little bit. Maybe it's not as, as Senator Cruz is concerned, maybe it's not, doesn't skyrocket. But if we can do something to move in the right direction, it sends, as you know, signals to the market, and it tells people this is the place to invest and where we should be creating jobs. So I'm optimistic.
You're absolutely right. We're out of time, but we hear you. Thank you, sir. Thanks for coming on.
All right.